What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Dunk on AP podcast. So, today we're going to be dunking on AP World History with Unit Zero. Now, of course, this is called Unit Zero because it is everything that happens in the class before the actual content of the class starts, which is the year 1200. So, without further ado, let's dunk on history. So, first up, we've got the earliest humans. And with the earliest humans, we get the agricultural revolution. So, remember that the first people were nomadic hunters and gatherers, but the agricultural revolution marks the transition from that hunter-gatherer society to agricultural settlements and early civilizations. So in this time, during the agricultural revolution, people discover that planting seeds allows for greater food cultivation and farming is developed. Now, the agricultural revolution is going to happen independently all over the world, and it's going to lead to a surplus of food that leads to a higher population and the beginnings of a hierarchical system where certain people are on top and certain people are on bottom. And then, of course, you have people in the middle as well. One of the first permanent settlements, if not the first permanent settlement, was Mesopotamia in Southwest Asia. Because of more food being available, you get a booming society. Now, Mesopotamia is not the only early river valley civilization. You've got the Nile River Valley civilization. You've got the Indus River region. You've got the Huang Ho in China, okay? And then you've also got Mesoamerica and the Andean region. Now, understand that all of these civilizations are going to be extremely important to basically just laying the foundations for the cultures and societies that are in this place now, whether they are still the existing society or not. Now, the big thing that these agricultural revolution societies and these river valley civilizations did, because they didn't have to worry about food all the time, they were able to turn their minds to other things, like the invention of writing. An example of this would be cuneiform in Mesopotamia or hieroglyphics in Egypt. Now, another example of being able to focus on things other than just food production is the invention of legal codes by the people in Mesopotamia. They invent the Code of Hammurabi, things like an eye for an eye, things that we might recognize. Now, you also at this time get the invention of religion. One of the big important religions that's polytheistic that comes out of the Indus River Valley civilization is Hinduism. Hinduism, of course, believes they believe in many, many gods, and they also believe in the cycle of reincarnation. Hinduism still dominates India to this day. You also get Zoroastrianism, one of the earliest monotheistic religions coming from Persia. Okay, now you also get a little bit later than this, you get the named term Judaism. Okay, you of course have the belief in the God of Abraham before this, but the name Judaism. So Judaism is spread around the world by the Assyrians and the Romans, who bring Jewish slaves and prisoners all over the world. Now, you also have the Hindu caste system that forms in this time, which basically establishes the hierarchy in India, which still to some extent exists to this day. You also have Buddhism, which comes from India, despite the fact that it really doesn't take hold in India as much. It borrows many of its beliefs from Hinduism, like reincarnation, but it rejects the caste system. Remember that Buddhism is going to be bigger in other places in South Asia, namely China and places like that. Also, you've got Christianity, which is the extension in a lot of ways of Judaism. Jesus will be the fulfillment of the Old Testament law, the Old Testament prophecies about a Savior after the sin of Adam and Eve, and that's going to spread all over the world at this time. Now, some of the people who didn't necessarily have these organized religions would be maybe some of the pastoralists. The pastoralists are going to connect these societies, but they don't necessarily have a settled society or a settled civilization as we would know it, but they do connect these societies through trade. Now, Confucianism is another big religion to know, and of course, this is in China. During the Warring States period, around 476 BC to 221 BC, you've got chaos and violence in China, and a man named Confucius introduces a religion which helps to restructure Chinese society after this period of violence, and you get a much more hierarchical, again, society that is adherent to elders, as is particularly adherent to male elders, establishing a patriarchal society, and very much practices ancestor worship and adherence to ancestors. Now, empires in this time, you get the Greek Empire, which is going to be before the empires, really getting into the the 900s-ish BC into right around 100 BC when it's conquered by the Roman Empire. They introduce ideas about citizenship and democracy, and the idea that one person can influence their government would be completely revolutionary. Now, also what you get is the Roman Empire. They conquered the Greeks, but they are also heavily influenced by the Greeks. They become really well known for their architecture and their infrastructure, which connects a lot of the known world. Now, the Roman Empire divides into the Western and Eastern Roman Empire. The capital of the western half, Rome, falls in 476, but the capital of the eastern half, Constantinople, lasts until about 1453. So now you're going to get the rise in trade cities, and these societies are going to start to become increasingly interconnected, even though they are still pretty isolated at this point, leading up to the year 1200. The Jin dynasty introduces a strict set of rules and punishments known as legalism in China, and then the Han dynasty starts a diplomatic relationship with the Roman Empire. And those dynasties last about 1220 or 221 BC to AD 220. Now, one of the big ones that you need to know is Islam. In 600 CE, a merchant named Muhammad receives visions from God and creates Islam. Their holy book is the Quran. Now, I say he receives, says that he receives visions from God, okay? He creates Islam. Their holy book is the Quran. He says that this is the last Abrahamic prophet. And then you also see that they follow the 5 pillars of Islam and Sharia law. They begin Dar al-Islam, which is essentially the things that Islam rules over. Remember that after Muhammad's death, Islam is going to break into 2 sects. Sunni believe that the successor to Muhammad can essentially be the person who is most qualified and best for the job, whereas the Shia believe that it needs to be someone from Muhammad's bloodline. And these Islamic empires will go on to control the Middle East really up until the modern day in a lot of ways. Some of the other post-classical societies, as we start to get into more of the content and the more relevant stuff for our class beginning in 1200, you get the Tang dynasty from 618 to 907 AD, which extend the boundaries of China and import champa rice. They also expand civil service exam. They also establish a tributary system for surrounding countries that will pay to China through the Tang dynasty. And then when the Tang dynasty falls, you're going to get the Song dynasty from 960 to 1279. What's important about the Song dynasty, outside of the invention of gunpowder, which is a huge thing, is that Song dynasty is going to be a meritocracy. Essentially, if you are most qualified for the job based on the civil service exam, you get positions rather than just who you know or who you're related to. Also, you get Neo-Confucianism, or a return to new, or what they'll call new Confucianism, because of the influence of Buddhism. Okay, so you get a big adherence to Confucianism during the Song dynasty. Now, in Japan, they are influenced by but never conquered by China. Okay, so the big thing with Japan that you need to know is that 800 to 1200 is going to be a golden age for painting and literature in Japan. Landholding nobles fought against the ruling emperor for a time. This is going to end in a feudal society with a military shogun and an emperor. The big thing is that you're going to have a couple of important people on the top, and then a little bit more poorer people on the bottom. Now, the Bantu people moving over to Africa, 600 to 1200 AD, they migrate across the continent. They spread their language and steelwork. That's going to be up around northern Africa. Now in Ghana, which is more central Africa, 700 to 1240 AD, traded gold and salt and spread Islam. And then the Great Zimbabwe in southern Africa, about 1100 to 1400 AD. We don't know a ton about them. But moving over to the other side of the world, what we'll eventually call the New World in the Americas, you've got the Mississippi civilization from the 700s to the 1500s AD. Cahokia is the main city, which is larger than London. At that time, the Toltecs in the 900s, they adopted Mayan customs and were influenced, or will influence the Aztecs. And then you've got the Mayans, who will be eventually in decline due to drought, environment, and warfare. So basically, what we have done here, especially once the Abbasid Caliphate comes into play in the Islamic Empire, we have set the date, we have set the table for what is going to be the post-classical world with the Abbasid Caliphate from 700 to 1258 CE. We have set the table for the modern world and what you're going to need to know leading up to the year 1200. So, hope you enjoyed dunking on history. See you next time.